Exit algorithms. Scale smarter. Sell stronger.
Welcome to Exit Algorithms, the podcast where we decode what it really takes to unlock growth, streamline operations, and prepare your business for a high-value exit. I'm your host, Pete Vera, and today I'm joined by Nicole Alos. Nicole is founder of Socratyc and the creator of Socratyc Sidekick, an AI-powered practice and coaching tool that helps leaders, founders, and teams rehearse high-stakes conversations before they happen. She works at the intersection of executive coaching, leadership development, sales, and go-to-market strategy, advising business owners, CEOs, and leadership teams through growth, pressure, and change. Nicole, excited to have you here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, I gave a little brief intro, but I'd love if you could start off and share for listeners a bit about your background, career journey, and how you made the leap into business.
Yeah, absolutely. So my background is in sales and customer success, management, leadership, and executive leadership. And I decided, I want to say about 8 years ago, that I wanted to just go off on my own. And as I was kind of climbing the ranks, I was doing less and less of the things that I love, which is, managing teams and supporting leaders and that type of thing. So I launched Socratyc 7 years ago. And initially, I brought together tools that really worked well for me in that previous life. So, everything DISC, 5 behaviors, situational leadership, all of those sort of methodologies that help me scale. And then over time, I realized, okay, I have this whole background of information, but then I'm just kind of hiding behind someone else's framework and someone else's tool. And so over the past, I'm going to say, 3 or 4 years, I've really focused on how can I bring together all the tools for my clients. So whether it's consulting, coaching, executive coaching, to make sure that they feel really prepared and they're set up for success. So that's even including getting a certification with an executive function. It's all the things. So it's been definitely a fun journey. And about a year ago, I realized that there was this unmet need that I kept running into with clients and that my consultants and coaches kept running into as well, which was someone would be so excited and so ready for these conversations. So maybe it was like, a pitch for investment, or maybe it was setting a meeting for the team to get them excited about the vision ahead. And there are a lot of times where they're in the conversation and it just doesn't quite go as planned. And so I really, again, was trying to search for different tools that would be able to support them. And there wasn't one. So I built Socratyc Sidekick, which is an AI-powered role-play tool aligned with our IP and frameworks to really help with that conversations so that people feel really prepared. So, and then most recently, I was accepted into a VC venture capital accelerator, which is a collaboration between Generator, which is a VC, and Meta. And going full force on this tool, completely out of my element, fish out of water. So it's been quite a journey for sure, from kind of way back when to it being this sort of executive leadership role to now being in the spot where I have this established business, but then I'm also brand new at something. So a humbling experience for sure.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Really, really exciting. Yeah, and we'll talk, I think, a lot more about the AI tool later. And there's a lot of rabbit holes we could go down. How about we first start off with building a sales team that scales? How do you advise business owners, CEOs to, how to hire and on-ramp and build a real sales team?
Yeah, so I think the first key is to get really clear on the vision. What are you trying to accomplish? Who is your ideal customer profile? What does this actually look like to start? And I think quite often leaders that I work with tend to want to let's just jump in. Let's just see what candidates we have. But I think getting really clear on what value are you adding to these salespeople, and what is going to be important is step one. And then step two is being able to get really clear on how can you have a diversity of personalities, communication styles, behavioral styles? Because when we think about it from like everything DISC is something I work with quite often. And when we think about that framework of, D, I, S, and Z, there's 25% in each category. So
Yeah, do you mind going for listeners that may not be super familiar with this? Can you explain that a little more?
yeah, absolutely. So DISC is basically a behavioral profile, which takes into account that we have these innate priorities, motivators, and stressors, which was pretty much developed when we were 20, 21, 22. It's those areas that might make us feel just like take less energy and we might gravitate towards. So the D style is really focused on let's get things done, let's be efficient. The I style is really focused on relationships, getting things done through those relationships. The S style is really about creating harmony in someone's environment and making sure the team's involved. And then the C style is really focused on analytics, data, or like really making sure that you're kind of beyond reproach, right? And so when we think about selling to enterprise accounts or even just, B2C type of situation, there's 25 of the population in each segment. But if leaders aren't, more intentional about the types of salespeople that they're hiring, it can be very easy to hire more of the same, more of the sales leader, whatever that style might look like. And when we think about the ability to stretch to meet the needs of that other person, our client or our prospect, it's important to just have that diversity of either being able to have a similar style or to be emotionally intelligent enough to be able to stretch to meet someone where they are. So the way that I always consult to hire is a little bit different than the traditional model for sure.
Yeah. How do you go about, identifying the DISC profiles of your team? I imagine it takes some time, and how can you assess that maybe after an interview?
So step one would be understanding whether it's DISC or any other similar tool, understanding what the team looks like and understanding what the sales leader looks like first. So that's pretty easy in terms of just being able to, pick that assessment, find somebody who's solid and being able to debrief it and make sure that you have that information. I think it's a little bit easier when you use behavioral questions to understand who can shift to meet the needs of the interviewer and shift to meet the needs of the conversation. I think it is a little bit harder to figure out what someone's DISC style is, but you can tell if people are able to understand where you're coming from and then shift that answer for sure. And that's something that's really hard to teach. The messaging and the elevator pitch and all of that is easier to teach than being able to make that shift, in my opinion.
Yeah. And how does that, interplay with the 5 behaviors you mentioned? What is that? I'm curious if you could talk a little more about, communication styles in a team.
Yeah, absolutely. So the premise of the 5 behaviors is based on Patrick Lencioni's book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, which has been around for quite some time. And the premise is that instead of just focusing on results, okay, here's our sales target. There's this foundation of establishing vulnerability-based trust, meaning I don't know the answers. Will you help me? When that's in place, then teams are then able to engage in healthy conflict, which is I'm going to put everything on the table and I see the value in us debating this conversation. When that happens, even if people don't agree, they can then commit to, okay, this isn't the path I thought, but I said what I needed to say and I'm on board. And then being able to have this peer-to-peer accountability. So all right, you said you were going to do one thing. I'm not going to wait for this executive leader to hold this person accountable. I am going to have the peer conversation. And the premise is that only when all of those pieces are in place are you actually able to achieve these collective results as well. And so layering on DISC really looks at, different personality styles are going to have a greater or less likely ability to, engage in healthy conflict or, be open or have those feedback conversations. But that's required. That means that everyone needs to A, know where they're strong, and B, be very intentional about where they need to develop, not only for themselves, but also for the good of the team. And the more that I get into it, the more that I'm learning over these decades is that leadership is a lot more complex than I think we give it credit for. So,
Yeah, a lifelong process, right?
mhm,
Iteration, improvement. Yeah.
exactly.
What are 2 to 3 things a business owner can do to improve retention, without spending more just on compensation?
I would say being able to be curious, and I'll explain a little bit more about what I mean about that, but also the ability to really ask for and take feedback. I think that there's a whole wealth of information that a company has all throughout the organization. And if there's not an environment where they can share, hey, I'm in it, here's what I think needs to happen, then I feel like there's a big disconnect. So when I talk about curiosity, it's really understanding the value of each employee and their perspective and finding ways to get that information back from them. What's working, what's not working, what's something that we're doing that makes no sense. I love asking that question to new hires. When I hire someone or I help somebody hire on a team, what's one thing that we're doing that is absolutely ridiculous to you? And you get so much good information that they would never have shared with you and they would have just kept it to themselves. From a feedback standpoint, it's being able to understand that no one can be perfect. No one can be the perfect leader, and having those regular conversations of how can I as a leader support you in a better way. There's a program that I recently got certified in the past couple of years called stakeholder centered coaching. And instead of really focusing on the 360 evaluations, I'm supporting leaders in having those conversations themselves. And just having this information and then actually doing something with it will drastically improve engagement, retention, and also create this incredible competitive advantage for your company. But it's not easy. So, of course, there's always a catch, right?
Yeah. Yeah, nothing worth it is usually easy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Really good insights there. Thank you. Yeah, I'd also like to talk about eliminating owner dependence, eliminating whether it's the CEO or founder, business owner. Do you have any advice around reducing them as the bottleneck in their business?
Yeah. So I think, I maybe I'm a little biased, and then I approach a lot of these situations, and I recommend approaching a lot of these situations with sort of a framework first mentality. But I think that this is a great example of a situational leadership approach, which basically looks at, okay, here's an employee. I'm not going to look at that employee as they're experienced or they're brand new. I'm going to look at that employee as, here are the sets of responsibilities that they have. And then for each one, where are they in their journey? Do they need me to be hands-on, or can I delegate and check in? And so a leader's ability to delegate in a very specific way will allow them to understand when to coach, when to delegate, when there's regression, something's not going well, they know what to do. And so that, ideally puts a leader in a position where they're only doing the things that they need to be doing. And they have people around them that are excited to take on these new responsibilities. But there's a solid plan about handing things off that are not going to be high risk to the organization as well. So I know that's a kind of a long answer, but I do think it's leaning into how are you delegating and how are you spending your time with each person, who in turn will be spending their time with the teams as well. Because I find a lot of leaders doing things that they absolutely shouldn't be doing because it's a waste of their time, but handing it off without that whole plan is also risky. And so that creates that leadership bottleneck, which can be really challenging from a growth standpoint.
Yeah. Do you think it comes down to like the workplace culture in some ways?
I think it has a lot to do with that mentality of you have it figured out or you don't. You're experienced or you're not. You're a leader or you're brand new. And that's just way too binary for this conversation. So I think when people can really understand that different people, the same person needs different support, then a lot of times it'll open up the conversation and get things moving a little bit.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, and maybe a practical thing a business owner could do. Do you have any recommendations? Is there like an audit system you do, or you recommend that they go through to identify which tasks they should be delegating more?
Unfortunately, I wish there was like this amazing quick answer, but it's literally taking the people that report directly to you and figuring out what are they working on, and what are some things that you think based on their experience or their interest level that you can pass on, and just really going person by person by person, and then letting them know that you're there for them. This is a part of the plan. I'm handing this off to you for specific reasons, and getting them excited instead of like, here's this thing that's mine, that's now yours. Really supporting that conversation of this is to help your development. So, I don't know. It always comes back to, again, being curious and having those conversations, I think is a really great start. And even if you're just thinking about one responsibility that you can delegate to each person, that might be a good start. And when you're seeing how engaged they are in that process, and then you're seeing, oh, this is something I would have done, but now I don't, now I don't need to, and now I can replace it with something that's a lot more high value, then I think there's that motivation to continue on that path.
Yeah, definitely. Love it. Yeah, let's talk a bit more about your coaching AI tool. Do you mind talking a bit, how was it built? What was it trained on? And yeah, what's it exactly designed to do?
Yeah, exactly. So I think in the past, when we think about getting ready for, again, these big conversations that matter, kind of these make or break situations that we often don't realize until they're gone, like until they pass. Oh, that was really pivotal, or that was really important. Thank goodness that went well. I think in the past, we just didn't have any mechanism to support those conversations because there were so many different ways that it could go that it's almost like why prepare for something that we can't really get a good handle on. And with AI, this gives us the ability to have these conversations and have the AI react in a realistic and even a more personalized way than a coach even could. So when I was looking for a solution, there were a lot of chat-based tools, which is all well and good, but are we really chatting in these conversations? No. So I ended up finding a tool that's currently being used more for presentation practice. So people who are preparing for TED Talks and things like that. Little by little, it's being used for more go-to-market. So, how can we pitch a certain product or whatever? But I decided to invest the end of last year and use it for these leadership principles, these, even something like imposter syndrome or giving difficult feedback or whatever. And so what I love about it is I have the ability to get really, really specific about what are the scenarios, what are the personas, what are the different, what are the different personalities you might deal with. But then I can also get very specific with the rubric of what a good conversation sounds like and what a not great conversation sounds like. So at the end of this experience, so they log on, they sort of have a prescription of what their practice path might look like based on either an assessment or a conversation with someone on our team. And they're going through these role plays, which they can be a combination of a tutor, like, hey, let's learn the SBI framework for giving feedback. Give me an example of a feedback conversation you have coming up. Let's talk it through. So it's kind of a little training, but then they're pulled into a real as possible role play situation where they're putting it into practice. And then they can immediately get a score on how that went. There'll be examples of how we might want to reword a question. It's not just this didn't go well. It's okay, this went well, but at minute 2, this was close-ended. Here's a way to make it open-ended. So the plan is that over time, people have not only the feedback, but the actual language that they can use in their in real life conversations. So it's pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, really cool. Really cool use case. Yeah, I'm curious, how else are you using AI personally or in business, and how do you see it affecting your industry the most?
So I am a part of a VC accelerator program for that tool. And there were 5 venture backable companies that were selected in the state of Pennsylvania, where I'm from. And I'm the only one that is a solo founder. And I've been able to really, I've been able to do well, I think, in this program as one person who's also has a full-time job and is a mom because of AI. It's allowing me to I can set up agents for certain things that I'm doing quite often. I've been able to build my web page. I'm able to build custom flows of these practice paths. And I have 0 true technical experience or true coding experience because of tools like Lovable. Even in terms of, there's a tool called Typeform where it's kind of like a Survey Monkey, but an elevated one. And now there's an AI component where I can say, here's the information I'm looking to get. Here are the biases that I'm really concerned about. Create a survey that will meet that need. So it's things that either I would have spent a ton of time trying to perfect, or I would have paid someone a good amount of money to create. And obviously, when you're bootstrapping a startup app, you don't have a lot of extra money lying around. And if you do, it should be really going back into tech. So I think generative AI levels the playing field in a lot of ways. But just like I do with my tool, I think it's incredibly important to kind of have these guardrails and a sense of, here's what I will use AI for. And here's where I absolutely will not use AI for, and being really clear on that vision. I don't use AI to come up with ideas. I don't use AI to write content. I don't use AI for a lot of things that some people think is the only way that AI is being used. But I will use it in areas where it's going to make my life easier. It's going to replicate some things that I'm doing that I don't really necessarily need to be doing. And it's almost along the same lines as delegation. I think a really solid delegator who has it down is doing really well in this AI space. You have to be clear, you have to check, you have to have, you have to QA everything. And so it's been interesting to see that some of those transferable skills that I never would have thought about. So
Yeah, oh, that's great. I love your perspective. Okay, Nicole, last question here. If you had to pick one practical tip for business owners wanting to plan a successful exit, what would that be?
this is probably no surprise after our conversation, but it would be practice. It would be practice those conversations ahead of time, or just be prepared, or connect with somebody who gets it, of how can you be transparent when you can't say everything that's going on? How can you ensure that the team's focusing on what they need to focus on, even when there's so much potential and excitement going on? And so, as we all know, what's going on with the team can kind of make or break what's happening. And so being really intentional ahead of time to be ready, I think, is incredibly important.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you, Nicole. I love this conversation. Where can listeners find out more about your business and the work you do?
Yeah, so probably the best place to start would be founderready.ai. That's usually the easiest connect. And so that talks about a lot of different tools, and that also connects listeners with me as well.
Sounds good. Great talking to you today, Nicole. I love this conversation.
Thanks so much. Great talking to you too. Bye.
Exit algorithms. Scale smarter. Sell stronger.